By controlling the outcome of the elections, and cherry-picking who won their seats and who went down to defeat, Pompeius Magnus began the 55 BC year with an injured reputation. The people of Rome, who at one time adored the conquering hero, likening him to Alexander the Great, now saw Pompeius as politically manipulative, using his position among the triumvirate to further separate Romans from their right to decide who governed them. But for Pompeius, generally meticulous in the grooming of his public image, there was too much at stake. The revolt of the Venetiae, which had begun in the autumn of 57 BC with the kidnapping of those sent to oversee the Venetiae's grain distribution to Caesar's wintering legions, told Pompeius that Gaul wasn't settled quite as neatly as Caesar's letters to Rome's newsreaders had indicated. By negotiating with Caesar at Lucca, before the latter marched towards Amorica to deal with the revolt, Pompeius acquired assurance of winning the 55 BC consulship by promising to support legislation which would extend Caesar's governorship in Gaul. With Gaul showing increasing signs of rising up against Caesar, Pompeius, sitting in the 55 BC consul's chair, would be well positioned to take over the moment Caesar found himself struggling to pacify the land. And, besides his ability to extend Caesar's command, Pompeius had something else Caesar wanted. Pompeius had to guarantee Cicero would no longer criticize Caesar, nor bait the Senate into attacking him. Pompeius agreed to silence Cicero, but only after Caesar promised to leash Claudius. Of course, Caesar would not agree to Pompeius being consul without having his own ally, Crassus, share the consulship with him, on the grounds that once elected, Pompeius could always change his mind and decide not to prolong Caesar's governorship of Gaul. Caesar's terms would have been no surprise to Pompeius. And Crassus had his own reasons for wanting the consulship. His eye had been fixed on Egypt since the early 60s BC. Not only had he attempted to sway the Senate into annexing Egypt in 60 BC, but he had openly sought the command of the army that would restore Ptolemy Auletes to his throne. The East, however, was Pompeius's domain, having, at one time, no less than 12 kings paying him homage, and he didn't intend to let it go. As consul, Crassus would undoubtedly work to secure the province of Syria as his proconsular governorship. From Syria, Crassus could command a legate to restore Ptolemy Auletes, and then, through that legate, gain control over Egypt's king, as well as her abundant wealth. Unfortunately for Crassus, during his travels to Sardinia, Corsica, and Africa, to oversee the grain distributors, Pompeius had sent word to Aulus Gabinius, urging him to march an army into Egypt and restore its king, regardless of the Senate's decree regarding military action and Sibylline prophecies. That done, even with Crassus sharing his consulship, Ptolemy Auletes and Egypt still belonged to Pompeius. During the 55 BC year, a tribune of the plebs named Gaius Trebonius began legislating on behalf of Pompeius and Crassus. Trebonius introduced legislation to grant Pompeius the provinces of Hispania Cyteria and Hispania Ulteria, wherein a new rebellion against Rome had arisen, while offering Crassus the proconsulship of Syria. The Lex Trebonia extended the normal 2-year term to a 5-year period and was written so as to allow both proconsuls to unilaterally wage war in their provinces, without the need to seek a vote from the other triumvirs, nor the Senate. Because the Lex Trebonia favored both Pompeius and Crassus, it was unlikely the Senate, most of whom were beholden to one or the other, would vote the legislation down. And so, Marcus Porcius Cato, in an attempt to stifle legislation which continued to place more and more power into the hands of fewer people, employed his age-old weapon of filibustering. As he had done against Caesar concerning his triumph, and then against Caesar's land reform of 59 BC, Cato rose and attempted to talk the day away, until the Senate was forced to adjourn. To put a stop to Cato, Gaius Trebonius ordered him expelled from the Forum Romanum, and when this failed, Trebonius followed Caesar's example, and ordered Cato's arrest. Once again, Marcus Porcius Cato was locked up for his use of the filibuster. When the crowds who always surrounded Cato grew agitated, threatening to erupt into a riot, Trebonius relented, and ordered Cato's release from prison. Despite Cato's efforts, the Lex Trebonia passed by midsummer. Pompeius was granted the 2 Hispanias, and Crassus was given Syria, where he was positioned to wage war against the wealthy empire of Parthia, in lieu of Egyptian gold. The Lex Pompeia Licinia, written by the consuls, Pompeius Magnus and Marcus Licinius Crassus, also passed during the 55 BC year. This law extended Caesar's imperium in Gaul for an additional 5 years, and employing the same thinly disguised language as the Lex Tribonia, allowed Caesar to unilaterally wage war. With the passing of the Lex Pompeia Licinia, Caesar was now protected, no longer being required to return to Rome in 54 BC, at the end of his 5-year term as governor of Transalpine Gaul, Cisalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. Those who were itching to prosecute Caesar for his unsanctioned war against Gaul would now have to wait until 49 BC. With the governorships of all 3 triumvirs now established, the normal elections for the upcoming 54 BC year were held in July. As had been promised to Publius Claudius, in exchange for rallying his people to support the election of Pompeius and Crassus for their consulships, the triumvirs, in turn, supported Claudius's older brother, and Appius Claudius Pulcher easily won his consular seat. But, because Appius Claudius, as the brother of Claudius, owed his loyalty more to Crassus, Pompeius made certain to attach Appius Claudius to himself through a marriage alliance. Pompeius's eldest son, whose name was also Gnaeus Pompeius, found himself married to Claudia Pulchra, the daughter of Appius Claudius Pulcher. With all 3 triumvirs now attached to the new senior consul, Appius Claudius Pulcher, the fact that Cato's brother-in-law, Lucius Domitius Enobarbus, who had been physically attacked and chased from the Forum Romanum during the previous election, was elected co-consul for the 54 BC year, no longer mattered. Unable to recall Caesar from his post in Gaul, Enobarbus was no longer a threat to the triumvirs. One of the elections of 55 BC, that of Curule Aedile, however, got ugly and ended in violence. Gnaeus Plancius defeated Aulus Plautius, causing a riot in the Forum Romanum. As consul overseeing the elections, Pompeius was caught up in the riot, and his toga was splattered with the blood of those fighting in the crowd. Quickly removing it, he gave the bloody toga to a slave, and ordered him to fetch a clean one from home, which Pompeius could wear while the elections were finalized. The slave ran straight home with the bloody toga clasped in his hands. When he entered Pompeius's villa, Julia, who was pregnant at the time, and likely heard the noise from the riot, saw the blood-stained toga. Jumping to the conclusion her husband had been slain, Julia collapsed to the floor, where her pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. With the commands for the triumvirs legally established, and the elections for the 54 BC year concluded, Pompeius Magnus first mourned the loss of his unborn child, then turned to repairing his public image, much damaged by the events of the first half of the year. At the end of his eastern campaign, while journeying back to Rome, Pompeius had visited the town of Mytilene on the island of Lesbos. There, Pompeius was so impressed with the theatre that he employed architects to recreate it in Rome. Upon his return to Rome in 61 BC, construction on the new theatre began on the Campus Martius, outside Rome's ancient boundary, known as the Pamerium. He chose this location because of a law forbidding permanent stone theatres within Rome's Pamerium. At the top of the theatre's semicircular seating, Pompeius placed a temple to the goddess Venus Victrix, or Venus the Victorious, and claimed he had not built a theatre, but rather a temple to which he attached theatre steps. Connected to the theatre was a large peristyle garden courtyard, completely surrounded by colonnades. Behind the colonnades were multiple rooms where the public could admire various sculptures, paintings, jewelry, pottery, and statues representing the 14 kingdoms he had conquered, along with other reminders of Pompeius's triumphal time in the East. At the far end of the garden, among shrines built to honor Virtus and Felicitas, a small curia was also constructed, increasing the Senate's meeting places throughout the city. On the occasion of the theatre's first performance for the public, Pompeius, who needed the theatre's dedication to repair his image, planned an entire festival with animal hunts and chariot races in the Circus Maximus, free feasting for the public, and an opening night production of Lucius Attius's Clytemnestra. Pompeius even convinced Rome's most prominent tragic actor, Claudius Esopus, to come out of retirement, to star in his theatre's opening drama. Claudius Esopus, who was a great favorite of the crowds, agreed. Unfortunately, due to his age and ill health, he found himself unable to deliver the lines of the most taxing part, that of his oath. Despite having to excuse Claudius Esopus during the play, Pompeius's efforts were successful in restoring his name. With his public persona back on the rise, Pompeius chose to remain in Rome following his 55 BC consulship, choosing to govern the Hispanias through his legates. With Crassus leaving for Syria, and Caesar stuck in Gaul, Pompeius Magnus finally had Rome to himself, without the interference of the other two triumvirs.